Hello everyone and welcome to the channel, or welcome back to the channel if this is, I apologise for my absence. I've been, I've kind of been waiting for something to grip me that didn't seem like I was opening any really big cans of worms just yet. I will do in other videos, but I wanted something to really kind of get me, and this one has, and not necessarily for white youth, because it might not be obvious, really, until we delve into it. So the source I'm going to use is The Guardian. They are, for people not in the UK, I suppose they might be international, but for people who don't really know who The Guardian are, they are they're The Guardian. Go Google them. And I know that they're quite a controversial source to use, but I personally read them, and I think that they don't put all the flowery, things in. They just tell it as it is, and to me, that's how I like the news done. Tell me as it is. Don't make it all flowery. Don't try and make it sound a certain way. Is what it is. So how we're going to do this is I will go through the bits of the article and we will, dissect little bits, and we will carry on and blah, blah, blah. Right, let's get on with it. The story we're looking at today: police looking into Rishi Sunak's failure to wear a seatbelt. Now, I'll be brief with my little dissection of this. I don't really. Police are looking into Rishi Sunak because he broke the law. Right. Now, again, if you're not from the UK, you might not have this law, but in the UK there are laws in place that mean that wearing a seatbelt in a moving car is mandatory. Now, there are exemptions to this, like if cars were built before seatbelts were fitted in them, or before that obviously you can't wear a seatbelt in a car that doesn't have them. But most cars these days, or all cars these days, have seatbelts, because most of those cars are from like the 1970s, 1960s, and they're all kind of old and you can't, replace parts and whatever, so they're kind of going quickly. He's broken the law for not wearing a seatbelt. And yeah, again, so there are seatbelt laws in the UK where it's mandatory. And, you can't go to prison or anything, but they're there as a health and safety thing. And yes, you could insert here somebody who's saying health and safety's gone mad. Well, yes, but it's there for a very good reason. That it sort of stops you dying in a car crash. If your car's rolling, you're essentially a sack of spuds, really. You're like a sack of spuds just flying around. You're eventually either going to go through the window, or you're going to be trapped, or something. And your seatbelt is probably your best friend in that situation. Now, the law is there. I will explain how I know this. I'm a second year law student. The law is there so that that essentially, if there's an accident and you're not wearing your seatbelt, you can be fined. That's the most thing that's going to happen to you. But equally, if your seatbelt, say, fails, and that's the reason you couldn't wear your seatbelt, then you can seek legal action against the people that make the car and fitted the seatbelts. So it protects everyone, really. But he's broken the law. Right, let's delve into it a bit more. It says, police are looking into Rishi Sunak's admission that he failed to wear a seatbelt whilst filming a video for his Instagram account in the back of a moving vehicle. An apparent breach of the law. Right, there's a tiny little bit we're going to look at very quickly. he's admitted it. Okay, great. Well done, Rishi. You've admitted you're breaking the law. Well done. So I think he's hoping that him admitting it is going to sort of minimise what happens. And it probably will, let's be honest. But the key in that is the only reason he did it was to film something on Instagram. Now, I don't know how many of you watch Instagram or have, follow influencers or those people that do like those come with me on my day videos, and you might get somebody who's pootling along in their little car and they've got a seatbelt on, because we realise seatbelts have to be worn because there's a law there, and it stops you from dying if anything goes wrong. And actually, especially in the back of a car, I mean in the front, if you're not wearing, crucially, I'm not condoning nobody wearing seatbelts, so please, if you're in a car, just wear a seatbelt. But in the front of a car, you've got airbags, you've got more security. If you're in the back of a car and that car stops without you having a seatbelt on, you're going straight through the window, aren't you? And your head is basically like a glorified egg at that point. You're just gonna not be okay. But he did it for Instagram, guys. That's all he did it for. And to say it's an apparent breach of the law, you can't sort of break the law. You can't apparently break the law. You've either broken it or you haven't. And that's a very simplistic way of looking at it. But you either broke it or you haven't. You can't sort of potentially steal something. You've either stolen it or you haven't. Same with breaching any law. You either have or you haven't. And yes, there is a process that takes place to determine that. But he broke the law. It goes on to say, a spokesperson for Lancashire Constabulary said on Thursday evening they were made aware of a matter and are making inquiries. According to his own government's safety campaign, any driver or passenger not wearing a seatbelt is breaking the law and is liable to be fined for up to £500. Right, so I'll explain first of all, for people not in the UK, what a constabulary is. Now, in your country, you might have we call them counties, but you might have provinces, or you might have states, or you might have whatever you guys call them. And a constabulary is, so you'll obviously, you have a police area in charge of, we'll use London for example. The police area in charge of, mainly in charge of London, because I know there's all sort of little forces as well, but the main area or police in charge of the area of London is the Metropolitan Police. So any sort of media things that come from that area, it comes from the constabulary. It comes from like Scotland Yard, because they're the big, it comes from that area. So the constabulary as a whole, they treat everything as a whole in this country, which is fine. So if something went on in London, it would be reported. The Metropolitan Police Constabulary, or the Metropolitan Constabulary, have said, making it sound unified and all that sort of stuff. Lancashire is a lovely place, lovely county up in the northwest of England. Most famous, I guess, Manchester. Any Man United fans or Man City fans, or what else comes from Manchester? All that's the Gallaghers. I don't know. It's the third city of the country, so most people have heard of it. But yeah, so Lancashire Constabulary that's what a constabulary is. Again, go Google it. They've said that they were made aware of the incident. Fair enough. That's how things get investigated. You have to be made aware of something before you can investigate it. That's fine. But this is kind of why I made the video. According to his own government's safety campaign. I mean, if you're the Prime Minister, right, you're the leader of the government, so you have to be setting an example and obviously following the law. But it's not just laws that apply to the time you've been Prime Minister from. It means, any law, a law made in 1983, 1993, 2003, 2013 or 2023, you should be the most scrutinised man in England, and you should be upholding them or being more careful to uphold them than anybody else. But especially if the government you are in charge of at that time have made a bloody safety campaign, which specifically upholds the law of wearing seatbelts and is enabling people to be fined. Now, I can't right. If I say I can't blame Rishi for this culture of prime ministers being fined and having legal action brought against them whilst they're in office, okay, he's responsible for what happens to him in a minute. But actually, we're gonna take a little trip down COVID memory lane. Those days of Mr. Boris Johnson being in government. This is sort of what I'm making this video about, really, is that it's a bit of a continuation of the culture, really, isn't there? Because, as we all know, there was I will say it's a campaign, but some of them were made into laws and whatever else. But there was a campaign of, COVID safety, we'll call it. We all sat around the news and we'd be told very clearly, you can do this, but you cannot do that. And if you do that, then you can be fined, or some people were arrested and sort of really short stays in prison. But something was going to happen. And that was fine for all of us little people, all of us people that actually have to keep the law. And then Boris Johnson decided that, well, all these little people have got the rules, but doesn't matter to me. No, thank you very much. I don't like them. And became a bit of a party planner, really, didn't he? Everybody remembers Partygate. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody knows what they think. And I think most sensible people are kind of the same conclusion, really. But then he sort of got found out and became the first British Prime Minister I'm not going to say in history completely, but certainly in modern history, to receive any legal action for purposely breaking the law. And so it kind of starts with him, really, that this culture began. And then, but I think what really gets to me is it's not like Rishi was immune from all of that, because he was there. He was part of his government, and actually there was a lot of Boris's government who were part of it, part of all these parties, and there are famous examples. Some may or may not have been in the jungle, but Rishi was there. He was fined for breaking the law once, and he wasn't Prime Minister yet, but he was still a member of the government, and still fairly serious, to be fined for anything. And I think only then it was about 500 quid. But still, the idea of a fine is, I've been caught out, I've paid up, not going to do it again because I don't really want to lose any more money, So it's not the first time Rishi's done it. And also, actually, because of the, all of the fines and all of the things and whatever, he was the man that brought down Boris Johnson. He was the man that brought him down, because all of a sudden he became Mr. Morality. sorry, Boris, I can't serve in your government anymore because I don't think we're doing the right things and I don't think you've got integrity, and actually, I don't think the government should be here. So the government went, dragged out kicking and screaming, frankly, but the government went. And Rishi tried to run for Prime Minister. They brought in Liz. She kept his seat warm. He was brought in. I will point out at this point, there was no ethics advisor for all of it. And you might think, why do you need an ethics advisor? I kind of still think the same. Like, they're grown up, intelligent human beings who say there's a proverbial line in life, and you all know when you've crossed that line, whether it be accidentally, whether it be on purpose, whether it be because you didn't know it was happening. No, somebody else did it and you didn't know. But we've all crossed that line, and we all know where those lines are. And they've got to have somebody tell them. But it took them a fair old while to get somebody in to do that, because Boris sacked the last one. Liz wasn't there long enough, frankly, to get one in. And Rishi was like, oh, I'll get around to it. Don't worry, guys. It's on my to-do list. It's got one in. But he's been fined. It's happened again. I mean, crucially, it's the second Prime Minister in modern history that's had that happen. And it's also the second time it's happened to him. Come on, Rish. Come on, mate. Like, come on. I know to you 500 quid isn't a lot of money. And you probably think that's what an average shopping bill should be, right? But, like, a fine is meant to be a deterrent. And yes, you're one of the wealthiest, he's one of the wealthiest men in the country, if not the world. He's wealthier than the king, for God's sake. I will put a disclaimer right here, right now. I keep forgetting that we now have a king rather than a queen. So sorry, Your Majesty, if you're probably not watching, but sorry, and please don't have me arrested for treason. So if I do accidentally refer to King Charles as the Queen, sorry. Yeah, us Brits are taking a while to adjust, I think. But yeah, so back to, you know, he's able to pay the fine, but it's not a deterrent to him, is it? 500 quid's fine. 500 quid's all right. It goes on to say, Downing Street has said the Prime Minister has apologised for what he has characterised as a brief error of judgment by removing his seatbelt to film the social media video whilst a passenger in the back of the seat of a car that, again, was moving. So, right, this isn't actually Rishi apologising. Downing Street obviously has a press office. So what will have happened is somebody will have been tasked with essentially making this go away. And they'll have gone, do you know what we need to do? Come up with, just say Rishi said sorry. Or somebody will put out some sort of public apology so that Rishi looks all right. And the best they've come up with so far is, I'm sorry, but I didn't realise. That's what a brief error of judgment to me is. And to me, in my life, if I make a brief error of judgment, I've worn the wrong shoes for an activity, or I've put in too much water in a pan and it's boiled over, or I've spent too much money on a pair of trousers, or whatever. You know, brief errors of judgment where, for a minute, you sort of, your brain waves your head goodbye, and it's, you know, whatever. And yes, he's human, and you can do that, but it's sort of, brief errors of judgment to me are things I don't necessarily realise at the time. So what? Did he not realise he was taking the seatbelt off? Did he not realise the car was moving? Did he not realise that was breaking the law? Or did he not realise that he was included in the law? Which bit doesn't he realise? And again, He only did it for social media. Rishi, you're not Zoella or one of the people from Love Island, are you? It's not like people are get ready with me, get ready with Rishi videos. They don't exist. Nobody cares about your Instagram. The only reason people care about them is so they can make parodies. Really. People make parodies of him, or my favourite is, I'm a bit of a TikTok fan. My favourite in TikTok at the moment is this guy who sort of splices up politicians' videos and argues with them so that it sort of fits his argument. And it's quite funny. That's what we're interested in your Instagram account for. We don't care about get ready with Rishi or what you're actually saying. So you've done it for social media, but you didn't realise that you were... Let's unpack the things he might not have realised. Because I said the few of them. He didn't realise that he was not wearing a seatbelt, or that he'd taken it off. Well, if you'd taken it off, you knew that you'd unplugged the little red thing, and that the metal bit that plugs it in, that had come out, and so the belt was no longer there, because it might have been one of those fancy cars where they're sort of in the roof and you pull them down, or it was in the arm of the seat. You knew it wasn't on you. The other brief error of judgment, I mentioned that he didn't know the car was moving. Well, you did, because you'd have felt it moving, and you've admitted to the police the car was moving. The third option, he didn't realise it was breaking the law. Well, again, you do, because the law is being upheld by your own government's policy, campaign, whatever you want to call it, that people in any form of moving vehicle, whether they're on the front, on the back, on the roof, crucially, please don't put people on the roofs of cars, but essentially what I'm saying is his government's got a campaign that anybody not wearing a seatbelt in a moving car should be fined. So he does know it's the law, because he's upholding it. Well, he's upholding the policy of it. The fourth option was that he doesn't realise the law applies to him. And I think that's probably the most plausible. Because he thinks, oh, I'm the Prime Minister, I can get away with anything, right? No. Sorry, Rich. No, you can't. If anything, you should be being more scrutinised, because, let's face it, you can't keep the law and your government are making them. And at some point in the comments, somebody's going to tell me that it's the King's government. I'm aware of that. I'm aware that the government is, the government to the crown, and it's not the crown to the government. But for argument's sake, it's Rishi's government, because he's the Prime Minister. So it is still his government technically. It goes on to, so yes, Downing Street has said it's not Rishi, it's the press office. Goes on to say a spokesperson for Number 10, so still not Rishi, said that a brief error of judgment, basically two spokespeople from Downing Street, or the Downing Street office has said twice that it's an error of judgment. Really sorry. He knew he was doing it. Wibble. If you don't know what wibble means, go and watch Blackadder Goes Forth. That's all I can say. It says Sunak finally accepts this was a mistake and apologises. The spokesperson said, adding, the Prime Minister believes that everybody should wear a seatbelt. It was an error of judgment. He removed it for a short period of time to film a clip, which has been seen, and he accepts was a mistake. I have one question from reading this little bit. If you believe, not only obviously that the law is there, but you believe that everybody should be wearing a seatbelt, Rishi, why did you take it off? why weren't you wearing a seatbelt? Why weren't you following or making the example that you say you're setting? I'm going to use the naughty child analogy because, as you can probably imagine, I wasn't always the angel that people think I was. And if my mum had said to me, I don't know, don't eat your chocolate before your dinner because it'll fill you up, and she went and then ate the bit of chocolate I was going to eat before dinner and it filled her up, you're not then upholding that example that you've got to wait for your dinner and you can't fill up on crap. The same with a seatbelt. If you're saying people should be wearing seatbelts because not wearing it's dangerous because you can die and I believe the law should be there. Words are cheap, Rishi. We're seeing that a lot at the moment. Those will be done in future videos, guys. Don't worry. I'm honestly coming on to those serious things because there's a lot I could say. But we'll look at a minor thing. I don't think it is a minor thing, actually. I think Rishi Sunak breaking the law in any way, shape or form, I'm probably going to get a fine, is crap. There's no better way to put it. And it shouldn't be happening. But to say that he believes the very thing that means he's probably going to get fined should be there and not do it, it's hypocrisy gone mad. It's hypocrisy. You want to be there to set the examples. Sorry. You want to be there to set the examples. You want to be there to uphold the law, but you're not, are you? Because you haven't. Your actions have shown that. And it's that old saying, actions speak louder. Again, we will come on to other things because I'm aware people are probably saying that this isn't a massive thing. You should be talking about other situations in the country. And yeah, I probably will. But I think it's quite a big issue that we have a second Prime Minister in modern British history. Him himself receiving his second fine whilst in a public office, but he's the second Prime Minister in British history that probably will receive a fine whilst in that public office. You know, apart from the King, who obviously is the top job in the country, I suppose depending on your opinion, but he's as high as you get. Next down from him, you've got the Prime Minister. So, you know, you can't just become the king. You have to be born into that. Sorry, guys. So any small boys wanting to become the next king of England, if you weren't born into the royal family, you're probably not going to be. That's just being nice. But Prime Minister is the next available job. He's richer than the king. We said that before. He's richer than the king. He's in the most privileged position you can be in to run a country. I mean, crucially, if somebody told me I was going to be Prime Minister tomorrow, I wouldn't have a clue what I was going to do. But if you've been going for that, it's not the first time he's run to be Prime Minister. He's been running to be Prime Minister for a long time. I think I'm not sure about the Theresa May leadership, because I think she kind of got just shoved in it, didn't she? But after that, he ran against Boris Johnson, ran against Liz Truss, ran against himself. It's taken him three leadership campaigns. I very nearly said election campaigns, and then realised that we haven't had one of those for a while. Again, Rishi, if somebody actually shows you this, I suppose that's being really ambitious, but if somebody shows you this, it's time for a general election, mate. But yeah, we've got this idiot who's in the highest job in the land, and he's been fined. Right, back into the article. The video that was posted on Rishi's Instagram isn't there anymore. So if you go and try and find it, nada, not there. And that's fine. Although I'm pretty sure most of the news people, so if you go to The Guardian or you go to wherever you go to, whether it be other newspapers are available, they probably have a copy of the video because they were probably smart enough to go and find it. Thank you guys. And I've watched it, and I mean, it's useful as a chocolate teapot, but I mean, there was no reason to take your seatbelt off. Sorry, mate. As you can expect, go back to the article. Labour have had some fun with this, and it's worth pointing. So, again, for people not in the UK, currently the Conservatives are in charge, in power. I think saying they're in charge is a bit kind at the moment. They're in power, so what that means is that they are the government. The Labour Party are the people in the opposition, so they're the people that sort of ask the government why they're doing what they're doing, and they criticise them, or sort of how the scrutiny works here is that you might, on a Wednesday afternoon, both leaders will debate things, and usually it's given a pretty hard time. And the current person who is the leader of the Labour Party is a pretty well-known, before he was the leader of the Labour Party, was a fairly prominent lawyer. He was the director of public prosecutions, so essentially he ran the Crown Prosecution Service in the UK. So if he wanted a worse opponent, when this comes up in Prime Minister's questions, as it will, and it'll probably be there Wednesday, actually, I'd go and get a bucket of popcorn and I'd sit back and I would watch it, because I mean, Labour are criticising him already, but they've got the best man to do it, and Keir will probably go to town, and it'll be great. It'll just be great to see him try and back his way out of it, because at the moment he can't really back himself out of a wet paper bag. But hey, yeah, so he's come under scrutiny for it by Labour, who they're probably enjoying this. So Rishi, you're giving them everything they want, mate. And the Labour Party have said, or a spokesperson of the Labour Party has said, that Rishi doesn't know how to manage a seatbelt, his debit card, the train services, the economy, or this country, and that the list is growing every day. Now, I'm not going to talk about the other situations right now, but I think that comparison is quite funny. There was a video that was done or a news article, a segment of a news show that was done where Rishi was talking about the cost of living. So he'd been given this really little car to go and drive, and he was at a gas station because they were talking about petrol prices, and he couldn't fill up a car, and he also didn't know how a contactless thing worked, and yeah, things like that. And I think what they're trying to say is that he's demonstrating that he doesn't really know how life works, and that actually the things that he's showing he can't manage are great and getting greater and greater, and they are. But I think it's funny how they've kind of compared it, because it doesn't take much intelligence to work a seatbelt. You get it from the arm of the car or the roof of the car if it's one of those fancy ones, and you plug it into the little black thing with the red pushy thing, or however seatbelts work in your country. They're all the same, aren't they? And it's true. It'd be funny if it wasn't really happening and all the rest of the things weren't going on, and it is kind of funny. But it shows a bigger picture of somebody that just doesn't care. It goes on to say, there are several exemptions to the requirement to wear a seatbelt. including a car that's being used for police, fire and rescue services, and for people with certified medical issues. None of these appeared to apply to Sunak, whose car was being escorted by police motorbikes. Now, I kind of explained this in the beginning of the video. There are exemptions to wearing seatbelts. It's not a blanket law that applies to everything, because, like I said, you might have a car that was made I think it was the mid-70s when this law first came in, that cars had to have seatbelts. Not even that you had to wear them, but for cars to have seatbelts fitted as standard, I think that was the early 70s, mid-70s. I could be wrong. I'm a law student, but I don't know when all the laws were made, and I haven't Googled it because I Googled the story. So if you want to find out when that law was made, go Google it. But, if your car was made in before that point, so mainly the 60s or the 50s, or it's like an old army Jeep where they're not there because the army don't need seatbelts, apparently, or something like that, obviously you can't be then penalised for not wearing a seatbelt if it doesn't have one. But most cars, if not actually from the point that law was made that they were all fitted, all cars have had them. There have obviously then been updates that actually, rather than them just being there and sort of flopping around, you have to wear them. Again, most people know that. Everybody knows that. So again, the exemption of old cars, they're dying out. So soon that won't be there. Obviously, the exemptions of being in the police or the fire services, that's a safety thing, because if you're in a police car and you've got a criminal behind you, you can guess what you can do in seatbelts. For fires, but also actually it's a thing that if you're wearing a seatbelt and you have to take that off before you get out and chase somebody, that person's half a mile down the road and you're not catching them. Or the same with the fire. If you're spending time faffing around with your seatbelt, because let's be honest, nobody can take them off quickly. There's always that one person who's going, I've got to get it out and I've got to take it off, and you sat on my seatbelt, or building's going to be burnt down, isn't it? Let's be honest. I think the only services really that wear them, and I'm not sure if this is true, but the only services that really wear them are ambulance people, which is fine because but that's not my issue. Obviously, we're exploring the exemptions. He doesn't have a certified medical issue, as far as I'm aware. Doesn't have a certified NHS doctor either, but oh, sorry, no, he does now. Future videos will be made. Just to go with that, future videos will be made. None of these apply to Sunak, as I said. So no medical conditions, no old vehicles. Because again, as I said earlier, if you are the Prime Minister, you have a James Bond car. Nothing is touching you. It's bulletproof, it's crash proof. Well, as crash proof as it gets. It's basically you got a fortified car on your hands, because obviously being him and doing his job could come with issues, and that's, when I say that's fine, it's not, but it's fine that those things have been eliminated or as restricted as possible, because naturally nobody actually wants harm to come to him. We scrutinise him, but very few people actually want harm to come to him. Obviously those things are in place because there are nutcases that will take that too far, which is why his car was escorted by motorbikes, or police motorbikes rather, because again it's extra security, and that's fine, but it doesn't mean that he doesn't have to wear a seatbelt. It doesn't mean that he gets to break the law. Doesn't mean that he should. And again, that's my issue, and that's why I've made this, is that the culture has continued. Yeah, There is one figure that I can put in this because it's in the article. Recent Department for Transport figures in the UK suggest that about 30% of people killed in car accidents or vehicles on Britain's roads in 2021 were unrestrained. So what that means is more people... Okay, actually, nowhere near the amount of people. 30% is still quite high, actually. That's still quite high in a country where if the law is that you're meant to wear a seatbelt. That's still quite high, and that's in the space of 1 year. And actually, most of that year, that's probably why it's such a low fit. When I say such a low figure, 2021 we're all shut inside, so that's the reason that figure's not any greater. But it's still not a great 30%. Still a lot of people. And Rishi could have, he put himself in the position. He could have been that person. But again, that's not my point. I'm not doing this video because I care about Rishi, and I care that he put himself in that position. I care because he's broken the law, and it's making politics in this country a joke when the person that oversees the running of the government can't keep the law, whether it be, and yes, somebody will say this isn't a serious law, this isn't like, when I say serious law, it isn't a major law that's been broken. I mean, he's not murdered anybody, no, but it can't just be the serious laws that apply to him. It's got to be all of them. If all of those laws apply to us little normal working people, then they have to apply to the big man himself. And if they don't, that's a problem. We've got to a point now where it's okay for prime ministers to be fined. It's okay for them to think the law doesn't apply to them, because, let's be honest, probably won't. You know, Boris did his fines, he was alright. Rishi paid his fines, he was alright. Oh look, Rishi's got more fines. Probably, they haven't come yet, so I have to say more fines coming, possibly, potentially. But even so, like, this culture exists, and it needs to not. Like, if you can't upkeep basic laws, you can't keep basic examples with something like this that doesn't really matter, how do you expect us to trust you when it does matter, when it's a big thing, when it's a major issue? Something to think about. And it's something to think about that actually you can draw parallels between seatbelt gate, which will probably become, and Partygate. Same situation, different leader, same party, same government. And again, from Mr. Morality himself, who brought down his friend, actually. Him and Boris and Matt and all of them, they're all great mates. He brought down his friend. He's got his mate sacked. He was a whistleblower. You want to put it like that? He was a whistleblower. Got his mate sacked because he didn't believe Boris had integrity and he didn't think the government should be doing what they were doing. Right. But you've replicated what he did. I will love you guys and see you next time. This was a little bit rambled and a little bit quick, but I will see you guys next time, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave things in the comments and whatever. Again, comments. People know what's nice. People know what's okay. If you don't, just don't say anything. Right, I'm going to go. Be kind and be nice and get involved, and yeah, see you next time.